Hi, we are streaming on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome to what is normally our Thursday night Greatest Generation live program. You can see Glenn here in the room, but we're going to commandeer it for a scuttlebutt tonight. So sorry, Glenn, but I do appreciate you being the co-host this evening.
No problem. Enjoy it.
Well, let's go ahead and get it started. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Scuttlebutt for Thursday, October 9th. My name is Sean Hall. I'm the Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. It's great to see you all here this evening. And as I was saying to our guests here in the waiting room, I believe we're going to see some new faces this evening. So to let you all know, we are the Veterans Breakfast Club, and our mission is creating communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. We've been doing it since 2008. We're happy to continue doing it online. A lot of you might think, like, this is breakfast. What are we doing here in the evening? Well, whenever the pandemic happened, we pivoted, started an online platform. We're online every Monday night at 7, and we're online every Thursday night at 7. Usually our Monday night program is filled with every branch, every era, veteran stories, veteran history, military history, you name it. And our Thursday night program is usually a Greatest Generation Live World War II specific program hosted by tonight's co-host, Glenn Flickinger. Glenn, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to this story, which is pretty interesting and unique and really not well known. So it'll be interesting.
And you said it. This evening, we'll be talking with Chaz Henry, a Marine Corps veteran, about his book Fuji Fire. This details the Marine Corps tragedy of Camp Fuji and Typhoon tip that hit Camp Fuji back in October of 1979. We're going to get into that history, the history of Camp Fuji itself. But also, we have several veterans here joining us: Mike Cummings, David Lutenberg, and I believe a Jerry Holt. Jerry, thank you for joining us last minute. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for coming to join us for this program. I'd love to just dive right in. We'll get into a bit of what BBC has on offer a little bit later in the program with our station break. And also to our guests, please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. Just be respectful, and we thank you all for being here. I'd like to start this evening, though, with Chaz, though a Marine Corps veteran, was not at Camp Fuji during the tragedy, but you had been stationed at Camp Fuji at one time. Is that correct, Chaz?
I passed through for training in 1978. So about a year and a half before the fire, I had been at the camp. So I was kind of aware of what it was, where it was, and the state of things there.
So we talk about, as Glenn mentioned, like this is a very sort of almost obscure piece of Marine Corps history. There's a reason for that, but how did you find out about it, and what made you sort of go down this road to write the book?
So around the Marine Corps, this was really a kick in the gut when it happened, particularly for those of us who knew Camp Fuji. So having been there I did 2 Western Pacific deployments, and it was on one of those that our ship pulled off of Central Honshu, and we offloaded for a month or so to do training at Camp Fuji. So I was aware of that, but I was back at my home base in Hawaii in October 1979 when this happened, and it was just a shock. The casualty figure, 73 injured, of whom 54 were burned and 13 died, was just, and this is peacetime. Vietnam is not that far in the rearview mirror, but it's just something difficult to comprehend. How can this many Marines have died in a non-combat setting? So there was that. Many years go by. I retired from the Marine Corps. I did a second career as a journalist. I retired from that. And I was posting some photos on Facebook. And one of them was me at Camp Fuji. And just in passing, I mentioned this was about a year before the big fire there. And then I was shocked by the number of fellow Marines, particularly, not to mention other people, who asked, what fire? And some of these guys had been through Camp Fuji in the 1980s. So it was really kind of a shock that it wasn't remembered. I didn't know why at that point. And then similarly, David Lutenberger, who is joining us this evening, responded to that Facebook post saying, I escaped from one of those burning huts. We'd met in 1981, and I had never known that. And I was embarrassed by that fact. And so the pandemic had struck at this time. This is 2020, and I'm looking for something productive to be doing, having retired from my journalism job. And so I said, well, I'll start looking into this. And so Camp Fuji was this camp that had been in Marine Corps hands since the 1950s. It was a camp that has a military history going back to the 1500s in Japan. Pre-World War II, it was used by the Imperial Army of Japan to train. After World War II, the U.S. Army took it over. In the 50s, gave this one parcel to the Marine Corps. And units from Okinawa, which is an island farther to the south in the Japanese chain, would come up and they would train because there are big open spaces where you could train with infantry moving, with tanks, with armor, with mortars being fired, and you could practice on a scale that was more difficult to do on Okinawa because a lot of the bases butted up against farms or urban areas. And so I was aware of this camp, and when we heard about the fire, it was shocking. So all this comes together in 2020 when I'm trying to find something productive to do, and I think I'm going to see if I can look into this and see what I might find.
So you just saw a picture up there of Camp Fuji. You said it quite a large area. What challenges did you face? Because you said, "Oh, I'm gonna start researching this," but did you realize how many people you were going to interview, or how in depth this story was going to become?
I had no clue, and so the first challenge was trying to find people. You know, we're 40 years plus after the event, and so I went to the Navy. I started seeing what I could find online. I went to the Navy Judge Advocate General website, and I don't know if this is still the case, but at the time they had a page that provided, I called it the greatest hits page, that apparently was the most requested investigation copies. And they had a copy of the investigation into the typhoon and fuel spill and fire that occurred at Camp Fuji. So I downloaded that, but it was highly redacted. A lot of things crossed out to include everyone's names. But by a fortuitous fluke, a mutual friend of, so after we had connected on that Facebook photo, Dave Lutenberger and I started talking, and a mutual friend of ours, Bill Henderson, Charles W. Henderson, who has written a lot of very well-received books to include Marine Sniper 93 Confirmed Kills, the biography of Carlos Hathcock, had in 1986 thought he might write about this. And he'd done a Freedom of Information Act request, got about 3/4 of an inch of photocopied material, but he couldn't interest a publisher. Dave was in Beirut with Charles Henderson. They had talked, and so he got in touch with him, and I got that material. Bill Henderson very kindly sent me that material, and that became my starter dough. What that included, most importantly, was a mostly non-redacted investigation, although some things that were not redacted in the second had been redacted in the first, but between the two, I was able to do a page-by-page reconstruction, which was really helpful, primarily because in addition to telling me what the investigators found and had determined, it gave names. And then I started what became a year and a half of trying to find people. And I used the online search engines, and fortunately, not everybody had a really generic name. I was able to find, say, for instance, I might find 5 or 6 people that had a name, seemed to be about the right age. And through some of these online search portals, I was able to get addresses. So I spent a lot of money on postage, bought a lot of stamps. And for that first year and a half, I just was sending out letters, and most were going to people who were not who I was looking for, but enough came back that I was able to start doing some interviews. Eventually, I would interview 130 plus people.
And would you say that most of them were willing to talk about this?
A surprising number. I wondered, throughout this process, I've wondered, am I going to be, doing more harm than good? Will I be pulling bandages off of physical or emotional wounds that I shouldn't be? But a couple things played in favor. I think the amount of time that had gone by, the fact that this was so little remembered that people who experienced it were wondering, why is it so little remembered? This was really a striking tragedy, this disaster. And so I think that put people, those two things put people in a circumstance that maybe made them more amenable to talking. We want to somehow document this so that, we don't complete our lives and nobody has talked about it.
So lead us through sort of Typhoon Tip. I want to bring up a picture of the size of this storm. And as I go through my slides, you're not going to realize how big this storm is in the first slide. But as I go through and show the diagram of it, it was massive. And that's saying that's not even giving it near enough credit.
Right. So Typhoon Tip still holds the record as the largest, most intense typhoon ever. Inside of it was recorded the lowest sea level air pressure ever recorded on Earth. This is 1979, remember. No lower sea level air pressure has ever been recorded. So interestingly, I don't know if it's interesting, but I chose, when I started out, I thought, well, maybe I'll first research the storm. And it introduced me to some amazing people. I interviewed 4 or 5 people who flew into the eye of Typhoon Tip. These are Air Force storm chasers in 1979. And I interviewed Navy meteorologists. These people were all based on Guam, whose job it was to track weather over the Pacific. And I think we'll probably eventually get to this slide that gives you a sense of the scale. This is over the ocean in the Pacific, but had this, if you were to take that and superimpose it over the continental United States, it covers, you can see, half to 2/3 of the continental U.S. It was just massive and incredibly powerful. It led to loss of life even before it got to mainland Japan, even before it got to Camp Fuji. In fact, one Marine was killed and one had to have his leg amputated when it passed by Okinawa on its way up toward Honshu, when 4 Marines went out and they couldn't resist watching storm-powered monster waves, and the storm reached out, pulled 2 of the guys into the rocks on the shore. One of them was killed, and the other, his leg was mangled so badly that it had to be amputated. It was huge and powerful. And even the meteorologists who flew into it, some of whom had a great deal of experience, are still in awe this many years later about what they saw inside that eye.
And so this was coming in. I want to bring Mike and David and Jerry. Please feel free to chime in. Jerry, let me make sure that you are unmuted. You guys were there. How did you hear about Typhoon coming in? When were you alerted, and what were you told to do? And anybody can take that.
David, do you want to take it?
Sure.
Sure, Mike. Yeah, I think we had been scheduled to go out in the field that day, but we heard this storm was coming, and it just seemed to get worse and worse. And they told us just to, we need to hunker down in the Quonset huts. And so we were cleaning weapons, playing cards, just kind of hanging around inside these small Quonset huts, waiting for the storm to pass, waiting for someone to kind of tell us what to do. So we knew it was coming, and we could already feel its intensity. And we were just kind of sitting in the Quonset huts, as Marines say, smoking and joking, having a good time, riding the storm out.
And was it nighttime, daytime?
Daytime. It was early morning, I think it was, when they first kind of confined us to the Quonset huts. But, as the day moved through, it just intensified.
How were the Quonset huts sustaining the heavy winds? Did you have to do anything to them to secure them?
Let's just say not well. These were, Chaz, please correct me if I'm wrong, but these were old corrugated tin World War II Quonset huts with windows that folded up. And there we go. There's some pictures of them. And the doors on each end, in some cases, were just a piece of plywood with hinges on it. So they were rattling back and forth. And as Chaz will get into the story, and Mike can tell you, we had a hard time keeping the doors shut because of the winds. So in many cases, we either put foot lockers up against them, or in some cases, we nailed them shut. But the water was still flowing pretty freely through the Quonset huts, under the doors, through the windows, through the leaky roofs.
How deep would you say that was in the hut?
Time, Mike, correct me again. I don't think it was. I mean, it was kind of running through. It wasn't even ankle deep. I know in my Quonset hut, I mean, there was puddles. You had to walk through it, but it wasn't like you were wading ankle or knee deep through it.
Kind of like a flooded sidewalk, just the water running down the sidewalk coming to the.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever met with the group and actually talked about this. So I'm honored to be here. So
Thank you.
I can tell you a little bit about my experience inside the Quonset hut.
Sure.
Um, we were packed in with Marines, obviously, and we had like flag colors that would designate how high the winds would be. It was like an orange, and I think red was the highest one, and we had reached that red level. And inside of the Quonset huts, there were two space heaters, one toward the front and one toward the back of the Quonset hut. So we could hear all these different sounds of fire and explosions going on. So I was running back and forward between the front door and the back door. And the only thing I could see specifically out of the front door was flames.
Hmm.
And so I did this for some time. And then in the last passage, I ran toward the back door, and that space heater exploded. When that heater exploded is when I ran through the front door of the Quonset hut. I misjudged the actual framing of the door, and I hit my right shoulder, spun me around. That's how I got out, and someone met me with a field jacket. To this day, I have no idea who that person was that met me with that field jacket. Actually, I don't even remember the names of all the Marines that were in the hut with me. So this is kind of, for me, kind of really difficult because I've never talked to really anybody about this before. Mike shared a photograph that was taken at Brooks, and it was a photograph. It was a young civilian kid there that had received. We gave him a little plaque with Mount Fuji on it, and it's me and Mike in the photograph. I hadn't seen that photograph since I think maybe the photographer took it.
Mm.
So this is amazing.
Jerry, we are very honored to have you here with us. And I know Chaz, who put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into documenting this for you and everyone you were with at Camp Fuji, and having Mike and David here that could attest to what you went through. As much as you are comfortable, please feel free to talk about. I want to get to, because you mentioned that there was fire, and obviously we understand that happened. Chaz, can you lead us through how did this transpire? Obviously, Typhoon tip is hitting. What happened? There was a confluence of just really bad things that happened that caused the fire.
Right. And I should just following up on Jerry, people watching should know he was on fire when that Marine wrapped him in the field jacket. The idea of putting the field jacket on to knock down the flames.
Mm-hmm.
And he also mentioned these heaters inside the hut. So the huts, they were drafty, wood frame with this corrugated metal, but there were these two heaters inside each. Imagine, say, a 55-gallon drum is one with an exhaust coming out of the top into the roof. There's one of those at each end of the hut. They're burning open flame kerosene. So to light them, you would open a little door, you'd throw a match in, it would light the kerosene, and there were tanks of kerosene uphill that would keep refilling them. So you could they kept the huts quite warm. You could even be too warm on the upper rack of these, two-level bunks that were in the huts. So that's what, as the storm is raging outside, the Marines are being warmed by these, two of these in each of the huts. Above the camp, some 3 months before this battalion, the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, had arrived at Camp Fuji to train, fuel bladders had been moved from where they had been previously for the previous 3 years. They had been moved to a point directly uphill from, now those are
These probably a little different. I was looking up fuel
Yeah.
bladders and I couldn't find the specific era, but I thought let's just give a visual idea of, I guess, what a
Well,
fuel
yeah,
bladder could.
so the bladders we're talking about are a rubberized fabric.
Okay.
So that's not really representative. I should have shared some photos with you beforehand, but
See if I
it's
have one.
rubberized fabric that they interestingly when they're made by the same company that makes the balloons that are used in the Macy's Saint or Christmas Day parade.
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, there you look at the top right. So they could hold, each of those could hold 20,000 gallons. They only had about 5 or 6,000 gallons in them. They were never going to put more than 10,000 was the idea here. So to the right, you're looking at the uphill portion, and the ground then to the left slopes down, and in fact, it had to be tiered at 4 or 5 different points in the camp. So you definitely have erosion issues as when it rains, the water rolls downhill, and these retaining walls that had to be built were 3 or 4 feet high. So every few hundred yards, there's a 3 or 4 foot high retaining wall. Not this. They're further down. So
Okay.
so when this logistics support unit came in the commander said, there's a reason that it's convenient to have these bladders here directly uphill. So first of all, so there are no paved roads at the camp. This is all dirt roads. If you look to the left of the picture, that's a road. That's a road just beneath this big berm. That's a road. And if you go toward the top of it, you're going out to the training areas. So if vehicles can come up and they can stop at this point, right by this huge berm, there are pumps on top of the berm and hoses running down on each side. If you're up in a Jeep, you'll pull up on the left, and the hose down there can bring in some gasoline and fill up your Jeep. They'll have a pump on the top and go down to the right. If you're in a tank or an Amtrak, a tracked vehicle, you can pull up and fuel up with diesel. And it's convenient because you do this all up above the camp, and then you just drive out to the training area or the ranges. So that's a convenience factor. There are engineering issues that come into play that make that dangerous. Even by this time, U.S. Army field manuals said never place fuel uphill or upstream from where troops are billeted. In this case, though, there was this existing berm, this long berm that you see in this photo. This is taken after the fact. It's taken the day after the tragedy. But you've got this 10-foot berm. When they set in the fuel bladders on the right, they had one that was filled with gasoline, another was filled with diesel. In this photo, you see back in the far distance, there's another one. It was filled with jet fuel, but that wasn't attached. There were no aircraft being used, so that wasn't attached to anything. But the diesel and the gasoline were attached to the pups, each of which is about 1.5 tons with their frames and all on top of the berm. And so, the people putting them in said, look, we're building berms around each of the bladders, and you can't really see it here because the storm has already washed it away. But where you see this diesel bladder that's still in place, that one, there were berms that were built up, and they're built up to a size where if they're supposed to be able to contain 1.5 times the amount of fuel you'll have in the bladder. So it could have, so that was put in, and they said, and then we have all this big berm that's here already, which was built as an anti-erosion berm, but it wasn't that 3 years prior, but it wasn't that well compacted. Actually, it was in 1973, I think it was built, so 6 years before the fire. They said, that's if anything spills, it's going to stay above that. The Marine Corps regulations for fuel handling didn't specifically address issues of comparative elevation, whereas the Army manuals of the time did. So what they put in was in keeping with the Marine Corps manuals, but there were engineering problems that what happened was when Typhoon Tip dumped in a day more rain than that area would typically get in a month. In 1 hour, it dumped 3 inches of rain. All that rain, a lot of it, accumulated behind this berm on the right side, the uphill side, and eventually it just created that breach that you see there. And so what happened, you see that the pumps have fallen into that. And if you look just to the left, you see what's left of the emptiness of the bladder that contained 5,500 gallons of gasoline. Actually, it contained a little bit more, but 5,500 gallons of gasoline is what spilled when that bladder brushed up against the frame of one of the pumps. It sliced a 5-foot rip, and then that 5,500 gallons of gasoline flowed to the left downhill on top of water, and then it flowed through those streams or trickles that were inside the huts, and vapors rose and interacted. It's possible a cigarette might have started it, but likelihood is that vapors rose off the gasoline when it was on the floor of a hut and interacted with the flames in one of the kerosene heaters. That created an explosion in one hut, the fireball of which rose above the hut in addition to burning inside. And then as that fireball fell to the ground, there's gasoline on top of water everywhere. That created more fire that then began moving. So you have these moving curtains of flame, 10, 15 feet tall, moving downhill, and then, of course, interacting with other huts and creating a succession of fires.
And as we mentioned earlier, the doors at points could be nailed shut. And that's
Right.
not stopping water or gasoline from coming in, to give everyone the idea here.
They
Right.
were nailed shut.
Or nailed shut, right,
Yeah.
Mike?
Right.
Chaz, thinking outside of Camp Fuji for a second, what was the relationship with the Japanese like at this time? And maybe Mike or David or Jerry, you could talk us through, like, were the Japanese involved in the camp? Did you have any relationship with them? Because this comes into play later with the recovery.
Right. Well, I can defer to the guys if they talk about contact they might have had previously.
Pretty much like
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
the cobbler shop, the guy that repaired the boots, and then the PX and all. Yeah, that was pretty much run by the Japanese nationals that would work on base. That's pretty much the only interaction I had with them at the time. Right, David?
Yeah, same thing. It was, where you got what we called Fuji soles put on your boots, big thick soles put on your boots. So when you walk through the volcanic rock, it didn't, come through your leather soles. But yeah, cobbler shop, tailor shop, PX, laundry, Japanese nationals. And they were friendly. You'd go down, you'd say hello to them when you went in, but that was about all the interaction you had. And there weren't that many of them.
No, I don't remember much interaction at all. I
No.
do remember the day that we were transported, though. I don't remember the name of the little small village or town right near Fuji, but we were
Timbo.
we were taken to this little clinic there, and I remember a physician, or may have been a PA or something like that, walking through a line of Marines. We were on both sides of a hallway, and I remember him giving people shots in the thighs and saying, "GI, you're going to be okay." That's pretty much my only memory of anything from that day.
How many people were stationed at Camp Fuji at the time of the typhoon?
There were about so the camp is in two parts. 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, Battalion Landing Team 2-4 contained 1,250 people, just over 12,000. The camp could accommodate 1,300, I should say 1,300. There were about 1,250 there. There was a small group that ran the camp of about 300 people that were down in a lower portion below a flight line that sort of intersected the two, a small airfield. But in BLT 2-4, the Marines that were impacted by this and Logistics Support Unit 3-9, there were about 1,250.
And was there a fire watch? Was there fire guard? Was there maybe the vets here could lead us through, like, was there training on if there could be a fire?
The hut had a fire watch. That was mandatory. So yeah, absolutely, there was fire watches, but that wasn't going to stop what was about to transpire.
And the term fire watch in this case is a little misleading. There's always what we call a fire watch in any barracks. So it's basically someone assigned to a 4-hour shift, and you're really just kind of securing the area. It's not really to be on the lookout for fire, so to speak. The term came from when you needed to keep a smoking lamp or a fire burning throughout the night at some type of expeditionary camp. So every Quonset hut every barracks around the Marine Corps always has one person on duty, 24/7, and usually in 4 8-hour shifts. And the term is fire watch, but there was no one specifically assigned to say, oh, let's, in case there's a fire, this is what you do. So
Now,
Also,
there had been sentries. There had been sentries placed on the in the area where the
yeah.
ladders were held. But at a certain point, the storm became so intense that they pulled that person back, just for the individual's safety. So when all of this happened with the bladder, there was no one there to immediately see it.
and also this was not at night. This was at a daytime event. So I don't think anybody was asleep during that time period. At least in the barracks. I mean, in the Quonset hut that I was in, I don't think that was the issue.
No.
You're right, Jerry. It was in the daytime, and we were all wide awake with that wind blowing and that rain.
Yeah.
Glenn?
And as I said, everybody was just we were cleaning weapons, taking care of your gear, just kind of passing time the best you could. There was nothing else. You couldn't go to the PX. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't get outside the hut. It was just the wind and the rain was just so intense. You just had to hunker down.
I wanted to ask, how long did the fire last? Was it a sort of flash fire that lasted a few minutes and done, or did this burn for a long time because of the fuel?
You, David,
remember? Yeah, what I remember is we were in the barracks, and of course the barracks or the Quonset huts kind of smelled of that kerosene heater anyway. But all of a sudden, it became very intense. That smell was very intense, and almost as soon as you got that real whiff of that kerosene, it's like, man, that just doesn't smell right. I remember, and I told Chaz this. There was sort of this rhythmic boom, 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 and that was each Quonset hut blowing up with flames. From the time that happened, I honestly don't know how long the fire burned. It from the time I was able to get out, help a few people, get them through these little rivulets of fire, as Chaz was talking about, that were burning, and as I began to help people down the hill, it was still burning. And I know we've got some pictures. I don't know if Chaz or Sean, if you have them, that shows some futile firefighting efforts by some guys, I think, with some fire extinguishers. And I have no clue how long afterwards, there you go, how long afterwards that was. But you can see in the windows and the door of that Quonset hut, it's still burning inside of there.
Yeah. The Marine Corps at Camp Fuji had no intrinsic firefighting capability. So this happened at 1:40 in the afternoon. The fire ignited. They had told fire inspectors who'd come through a month or so before and had raised questions. They said, well, we have a handshake agreement with the local firefighters. And so a call went out to both the Japanese military base across the street and to firefighters in the Japanese town of Gotemba, very nearby. And within half an hour, there were Japanese firefighters on the camp. Some volunteer firefighters came from small villages. Some of them got in, some were turned away because of confusion at the gate. And the firefighters who were able to come in had never been allowed on the camp before. They had no idea where huts were, where water sources were, where hazardous material might be stored. So they're coming in, and they'd not been told it was a fuel fire. So they brought water trucks, water pumps, and they would have brought chemicals had the sentry who called, known it was a fuel fire and told them that. So they showed up, they're let in, and they fought the fire. To the question of how long it lasted, it was contained. This is about 1:40. It starts, contained around 5 o'clock, but it was still smoldering the next day.
And also, they're fighting the fire during a typhoon. They're not.
Yes.
It's not clear day that they're fighting a fire.
Yes, people are escaping the huts and running from the fire amidst the typhoon. You can imagine how loud it is, how difficult it is to get word to people, in addition to the being plummeted by winds that are throwing around debris, that are throwing around even beadlets of gasoline as it's being thrown into the air, adding to the confusion of trying to create a way to get out. So just briefly to continue the fire story, they about 5 o'clock, they have it under control. The protocol of the Japanese firefighters, and this sort of again goes to the relationship of the U.S. and Japan at the time. Their typical protocol is, okay, you get it under control, you do a damage assessment, and then try to find the source of the fire. After they had it under control, they were unceremoniously escorted off base. We'll take care of this from here on. You leave. And that created some consternation among some of the Japanese firefighters who said they've never allowed us on the base before, and yet when they're in trouble, they call us, and then we come in and he didn't say save the day, but that's in essence what they did, and then they shoo us off. So it was an interesting aspect, and again spoke to sort of the relationship of the U.S. and Japan at that time, 1979. It's not it's 30 years after World War II. It's the end of that's an interesting dynamic of the time. Now, Jerry mentioned being taken to doctor's offices and clinics and hospitals in Gotemba, this small rural town nearby. There was a small battalion aid station on Camp Fuji. There was one medical doctor and about 30 corpsmen assigned to 2-4. And they did what they could, but you can't, because of the storm, you can't fly aircraft. There's no way you're going to be able to evacuate these people to a higher echelon hospital. So they threw these guys on trucks, and they took them. 10 of them were taken in at a Japanese military hospital. But you're dealing with 40 to 50 really badly burned young men. And so they just took them to doctor's offices, or there was a small hospital in Gotemba. It was more like a clinic, even though it was called a hospital, and then even smaller places. And these people were already stressed, dealing with casualties, not fire related, but people who have been hurt in the typhoon, debris being blown into them and such. And suddenly, these people are dropped on their doorstep. These really gravely burned Marines. Those people did what they could. The Japanese doctors and nurses took them in. As Jerry mentioned, they were in hallways. They didn't have rooms for everybody, but they did what they could. They exhausted what supplies they had to try to keep people comfortable. But a lot of people didn't get IV started, and fluid replenishment is important to a burn injured person. But because this would have been the same case if this had happened in a rural part of the U.S., it's just very specialized training to be able to get IVs through burned skin. And these people, most of them didn't have it. But they did absolutely what they could for a period of 7 or 8 hours. They took care of these Marines. And again, just, incredible kindness and, altruism coming into play, even though they might not have, in this Japanese-U.S. relationship at the time, been, treated all that well.
I want to get to that. This question might sound odd, just simply because what is the difference between like a first, second, and third degree burn? And if you're severely burned, whatever percentage of your body, what's the medical idea of like what these men were dealing with?
I think maybe Mike or Jerry can best address that.
I want to just talk just a second about the transportation to get to one of the clinics. We were all extremely cold. We had lost so much, our flesh was gone. And there was one incident where I think there was from 3 to 5 Marines. We were in this van. It was basically like an open cargo van. And it was so cold. And we were like in the back of this van, we're clenching each other, just holding on to each other, trying to figure out where we were. We were disoriented and everything, right? So I have 70% of my body that was second and third degree burns. And what my understanding is this: the higher percentage one, the third degree one, and even fourth degree in some areas, the nerves are exposed. Like you can wave your arm by and just have a little wind from that, and it would be very, very painful for you. So I don't know the medical terms for that, but I know third degree is a lot more dangerous than second degree. Second degree, you actually probably feel it more, but the scary part of it is when you don't feel it, when you don't have that sense of feel anymore. So
I think that's one thing here that I know Chaz has got some other pictures that show the actual flames, but the degree to which Marines were burned. I know when I got out, the first thing I saw was a Marine, and he he had no face, he had no upper body. The skin from his arms was hanging and dripping down to the ground. And he looked at me, and I think to Jerry's point, he was burned so badly he couldn't feel what was going on, but he could still talk.
yeah,
And he looked at me and he said, Loot. He goes, "Is my face okay?" And I looked at him and he had no face, but I knew who he was because he was a big guy and his voice was still okay and he wasn't panicking. But the degree to which he was burned, and he later died, was just so horrific, that I think that's what's really important here is the degree to which Jerry and Mike and others were burned. Um, and as Jerry said, with no flesh, you are so cold. Um, but some of the guys who weren't burned as badly, still wanted to stand outside in the typhoon because the cold rain felt good because they could feel their burns and it was cooling to them. But when you get that many people with that severe and grotesque of burns, it's unbelievable to see that, to feel that. And we talked about, the atmosphere. I don't know about Mike and Jerry, but once I got outside the hut, the only thing I ever heard was this Marine's voice. I couldn't tell you if I heard the flames. I couldn't hear the wind. I don't think I heard the rain. It was like one of those scenes from a movie where you get hit with an RPG and everything kind of goes fuzzy. Uh, I didn't hear anything. And I never realized that till Chaz and I were talking, Chaz 4 years ago. He said, "Tell me about the sounds." I'm like, other than that rhythmic boom, boom, boom of the huts blowing up, I didn't hear anything. It was almost like it was silent for me. Um, and I think that was because it was so chaotic and we were so hyper focused on doing whatever we could to help those who were so severely burned that everything else was just drowned out. But I think that's important, particularly for Mike and Jerry, is for everyone to understand they just didn't stick their hand on a stove and got their hand burned.
yeah,
In some cases, their entire bodies, second, third degree burns, some beyond recognition. There was even Malvo, who was killed instantly in his hut when he breathed in that flame. So it was the burns, and the degree to which the burns came was just horrific.
yeah.
Mike,
Mike.
why don't you have an so interesting personal experience with that?
As far as running out of the hut,
Yeah.
yeah, whenever I finally went out of the hut, I fell off the tier to the section below, and I got up and I started running out. And this story is similar to what David just told. As soon as I get out of the flames, I see a Marine standing there, and I'm asking him for help, and just the look on his face, and the look on everybody's face, and he said, "I can't." He said, I just can't." So I got to thinking, I must look that bad, to see the horror on these guys' faces. I said, we were burned, but these guys experienced the other side, seeing what was happening to us. So, it's not just us, the ones that were actually burned. Everybody that witnessed what took place has got to deal with this. But and getting back to the burns and stuff, when it first happened, it hurt like hell. But by the time I got out of the fire, and Jerry had mentioned it, I wasn't hurting, and why am I not in pain anymore? I don't know if it was the shock or if it just killed my nerves, from the flames that just killed the nerves. But yeah, I still remember that like it was yesterday. So.
Yeah.
like I say, we all burned or not, we're all dealing with what took place that day.
That
It's different than a combat situation. I mean, I was in some combat in Beirut, and the first time we got hit, everybody knew what to do. Every Marine picked up their rifle. You knew where to go. You knew what to do. We hadn't trained for this. So when you get outside of a burning building and you run face to face with people like Mike and Jerry, you're like, it was chaos. We don't know what to do. And I don't know how long that lasted until we realized we got to help these guys. We got to help each other. But it was chaotic from a perspective of it's not that instinctive as it would be if you were in a combat situation and got shot. It is very different.
Jerry, you were about to say?
the thing that is, I still remember this so well. There's two things: the smell.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
kerosene, I will never leave, that will never leave my mind. The one thing that happened to me much later when we were at Brooks, and I was taken to the restroom one day to get cleaned up, and there was a Marine there. He was getting a bath. He was African American, and he said to me, he said, "How's it going, Holt?" Like that, right? And to this day, he was so disfigured. I still don't know who he was to this day. And that is something that has haunted me for a very long time. And I'm sure at some point in my life I knew who he was. I could tell by his voice, but to this day I have no idea who he was.
I can speak a little bit to that as Chaz takes us through what happened and the experience down at Brooke Army Medical Hospital as well.
I think I know who that was, Jerry,
Really?
for two reasons. And I think that Isaac Williams, I'm trying to remember what platoon he was. Was he 81s?
He was 80. I'm pretty sure he was 81s. Yeah.
Was.
And I say two things. One, Isaac was just horribly burned. He was burned over 90% of his body. And everybody who was in the ICU with him said he was always asking how everybody was.
Yeah.
So that, the fact that he was, he inquired of you that way, and he was a motivator, and people who were, burned terribly, but not as badly as Isaac, would comment about, how uplifting he was. And he's doing well, by the way. He's after he came back, he got married, had 3 children, has a dozen or so grandchildren. He's a deacon in his church, president of the church choir. He was commander of a VFW post in Alexandria, Louisiana. So I'll bet, I can't say for certain, but I'll bet that's who it was.
Well, if Chaz, if that's true, this meeting was worth it just coming for that.
And I will get you guys in contact with each other.
Thank you.
It's a good time, Chaz, for me to kind of share my experience at Brooke.
Yeah, I think we should introduce what. So
Yeah, go ahead.
eventually,
Yeah.
the guys were taken. The storm let up enough so that helicopters overnight between the 19th and the 20th could transport the guys to an Air Force hospital at Yokota. Eventually, from there, 38 were medically evacuated on 2 C-141s to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and Brooke Army Medical Center, which is the site still to this day of, I think, I don't even know that you need to say arguably, the best burn center in the world is the U.S. Army Burn Center, at part of the Institute of Surgical Research at Fort Sam Houston. And yeah, Dave, you can talk about, then you left Camp Fuji shortly thereafter.
I was due to rotate back from Okinawa back to the States about a month after the fire. And I said, well, I'm not going home. I'm going to Brooke. And so the Marine Corps, paid for my flight from Okinawa or from Camp Fuji in Japan back to San Francisco. And from there, it was on my own dime. I said, oh, I'm going to Houston. So I went down there and I went to, yeah, San Antonio. And I said, I'm going to the hospital. So I get to the hospital, and it's somehow everybody knew who I was, and they welcomed me, the nurses, the doctors. The word must have got somehow that I was going to be there. So I walked in. I said, I got to see my guys, I got to see my guys. And a nurse came up to me and she says, well, we're so glad you're here. It'll really lift their spirits. She goes, I'll kind of escort you and introduce you to everyone. I'm like, you don't need to introduce me to anybody. I said, I've lived with these guys for a year. We've been on ship together in Quonset huts. We've been in the field together. I said, I know these guys. You don't need to introduce me. And she goes, no, you don't understand. I'm like, all right, whatever. And so we went up to the unit and we went to the first bed and she goes, this is Mark Bedwell. And I'm looking at him. Mark had no face. Um, and without her help, there's so many people that I had lived with in close quarters for a year that there's no way I would have recognized them. It was that they were burned so badly, disfigured so horribly. And we did that throughout the day. I went from bed to bed to bed to bed. And she goes, this is Roberts, this is Schaefer, this is Mike, this is Jerry. And it was just unbelievable um, that she had to introduce me to these guys that were my friends that I'd lived with. But beyond how horrific that was, and Jerry, Mike, you went through this, I didn't, but you would hear these just horrific screams. And every day they had to do this debriding process to keep infection from setting in on these guys. They had to scrub these open wounds and they would give them morphine, but I don't think it helped. But the screams these guys let out were just like nothing you've ever heard. And the pain must have been so bad, day after day. But it was, as Mike said earlier, was it worse to be in the fire or to face the fire and look at your friends who had been burned so badly that when you go to see them a month later, there's just no way you can even recognize them. It was, so as Jerry said, that like the smell you'll never forget. I'll never forget seeing these guys. Just they could have been from another country in another time. I had no idea who they were without this nurse walking me around, and she would whisper in my ear, "This is so and so. This is so and so."
Yeah,
Chaz, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
the nurses there were absolutely incredible. Uh, there was one in particular, and I think I've tried to find her forever. Her name was Denise McKinney. She was a nurse there, and she was so tough on me. She always made me try to do things myself, you know. And there was some funny moments too. I mean, everything is serious here. We're like in this really deep discussion. But there was this one moment when I was starting to learn to walk again. Okay. I had no strength at first, right? I mean, I couldn't even open a salt pack like the McDonald's. Had no dexterity in movement, right? So she's trying to teach me how to do this. And so we're walking down this nursing station one day, and I'm doing fine as long as she's like holding me, and I have a towel around my waist. That's all I have. And the minute she lets me go, my right shoulder just drops. She walks up behind me and yanks the towel from around me. Yanks this towel up. And of course, I cover up right away, right? So you still got pride, even though your body is like 70% burned, you still got some pride there, right? So, but that they were absolutely wonderful. The hospital, I cannot say enough good things about them. Yeah.
I'd
Chaz,
like to,
go ahead, Mike.
yeah, I'd like to talk about when David brought up about the scrubbing and the screams and the morphine. Yeah, the morphine, it made it more tolerable, but the pain was still there, even shot up with morphine. So, yeah, I don't think anything could have killed the pain, as far as what they could have given you. It just kind of made it a little more tolerable. So,
Yeah, your
Much.
nerves are like sitting there. They're like there. There's nothing that the skin is a huge organ. And once you lose that huge organ, there's very little protection for your body. Just a little bit of wind hurts.
mhm.
And so like
Yeah.
the worst thing about that for me was that the first initial one, the first scrubbing when I got there, the first one, right? I was in a hallway and I could hear sounds, but I didn't know what was going on. I knew it was bad, and I knew I was going in that room at some point. It's horrible. It's absolutely, I'm a news photographer. I've been a news photographer for a very long time. When September 11th happened, there was a photograph of a man jumping from one of the Twin Towers. And I was in a staff meeting at work, and somebody said, I can't believe he would jump. And my response was, I totally understand why he would jump because
Yeah.
I know what's on the other side. I know what he's jumping from.
Yep.
So if you never experienced it, you might have a different feeling, but I can only imagine. I can imagine exactly what he was experiencing and why he jumped.
Yep.
I
And,
can
and
say,
it's too bad that tonight we don't have some of the pictures that were taken that Chaz and I showed when we were at the Naval Academy a couple weeks ago, because it shows the intent. There are some good pictures that shows the intensity of that fire. It was just unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Chaz, I wanted to ask sort of about treatment for like how are burn victims treated? Wrapped, I just sort of picture of somebody wrapped, but what are you wrapped with? How does your skin regrow? Jerry, you were talking about how you didn't have any dexterity and any strength. What's the recovery process? How long does that take?
Um, I think that's this hospital, like I say, was amazing. Like the treatment that they used on me was two silverdene and sulfamalin. And I was not bandaged. I was open in I guess a room that was pretty protected from infections, because that's the thing that kills most burn patients is infections. But my body was completely covered with one of these two chemical creams that they would apply. Um, so in terms of time, I was there probably about 4 months, which is amazing.
Your skin regrew in that time frame.
No, no, it didn't regrow totally. So once you get to the point where I mean, there were skin grafts, obviously, lots of skin grafting, but then there was one of the big problems is scar tissues developing, right? So it's called like a hypertrophic or keloid scar. And so in African Americans and olive drab skin, it tends to scar more. So what the body wants to heal really, really fast, right? And so one of the things that's the way it was treated at that time, I'm not sure how it's treated now. We wore compression um uh chest covers. I had a whole full body suit. It's called a Job stocking. And so what that supposedly does is, like I say, is keep those scars contained so you don't develop scar tissue like between your joints or your elbow or areas like that. It keeps it flat. So that's that, and I wore that for a year. And I would wear 20. The only time I would take it off was to shower. I had three three sets of those, and two were always clean, and I was always wearing one. And then you continuously put the cream on your body over that time period. So it's a long process. And even to this day, now I have limited flexibility in my shoulders, and a lot of it is scar tissue. I've had 3 or 4 surgeries to basically, if it's one solid scar, they do what's called a Z-plasty, which it makes like a Z, like a Z pattern. They fold the skin over one way or the other, which allows the arm to flex more. So the joint parts of the arms and like that, that's the most dangerous part where you lose range of motion.
Mike, what was your recovery like?
it's pretty much the same as what Jerry had just spoke with. I mean, you have to deal with the skin grafts and, just the years of recovery, basically. Yeah, it's not much. It's actually years to recover from that. And I ended up having probably, no, on my face alone, 7 skin grafts between Brooke and then going to the Navy hospital after I left Brooke. And then a couple of them on my feet. But even after that, I still have the skin that pulled down from both eyes. And they wanted to do more skin grafts. And by that time, after 7 on my face, I said, if it's not going to get much worse than this, I'm going to just live with it. I'm tired of going through this.
Yeah.
So my hands right now are probably what I deal with the most. They just the range of motion I have them. I don't know if you can see them right here. I mean, I can still use them, but they told me when I left, I was 18. They said, don't be surprised by the time, if you're 30 years old, your hands are going to be like this. But they pointed at me. They said, but that's probably going to be up to you. And, as a Marine, I took that as a challenge I'm not going to get like that. I can still use them, but, like I say, I'm limited. I don't have much feelings in them, but I'm just glad to be here.
Al asked a good question in the chat. The way that we have treated burns from 1979 to now, are there treatments, Jerry or Mike, that they have developed over the course of the last, 30, 40 years that has helped you? Jerry, you were talking about that sort of zigzag surgery.
Right, yeah. That's been probably the best treatment that I've had. I went once looking for I was told that there was some laser stuff that was being done, and that wasn't very successful. But I met the doctor that ended up doing this surgery on me the last time that was done, right in the middle of COVID, as a matter of fact. Um, and that's helped me the most. But you have to constantly be aware of it. You have to wear, like, I wear long sleeves clothing all the time to keep the sun off of my skin. I wear a hat. I mean, you got to do a lot of preventive maintenance on your body, and you got to exercise also. You have to exercise. You have to keep your joints limber, or stretch the skin as much as possible. And you got to get rest. You have to rest the body. I get a lot, I mean, I'm also older now, but uh I find myself getting really, really tired if I'm out in the sun a long time. The sun is like really bad for you. I know, Mike, you fish a lot, so I hope you cover up.
Oh, absolutely, Jerry. When I go fishing, I always wear a straw hat. I look like an old farmer out there when I'm fishing. But getting back to the sun, ever since the fire happened, I mean, I've had to wear sunglasses. People think, oh, you wearing sunglasses, you think you're cool. No, I get a severe headache if I don't wear them because of the fire. I mean, it just did something to my eyes that I'm just light sensitive. So, I mean, even if it's just glare, if it's cloudy, but if there's a glare, I have to wear them or I'll get a headache. I mean, a bad headache. And it just, I just keep my sunglasses close by at all times.
Yeah, the psychological part of it also, it sticks with you a very long time. Like, I'm still to this day, I have a hard time if I go to fill my car up, if somebody's filling their car up and the engine is running, I'll just go to another station.
Right.
I have this weird feeling about it. I'm super, super protective at home. My kids, I know when they were little, they probably thought I was insane, but I'm like hyper vigilant about fires and things like that.
You always know where the exit to a room is.
Always know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, one thing,
Yep.
if a movie comes on and you know how they like to do all this stuff, if somebody catches on fire in a movie, I just get up and walk out of the room. I just I can't sit there and watch it.
It was a number of years before I could go to a candlelight service on Christmas Eve in a church. I couldn't I couldn't be in a building with all those candles lit.
Yeah.
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 There was a guy, Greg Hassel from Chicago.
Yeah.
He was
Yep.
seven, he
I
was 70
remember.
years old. He's just 17 or maybe 18. But Greg was this redheaded kid with chubby cheeks. And I was in Chicago some years ago, and I actually got to meet with his sister.
I have too. Yep.
In, in Greektown, we met there, and we
Yep.
had, and she told me something that I wasn't aware of. That really, really was really touching. She told me that at nighttime, the parents that had gathered there, they would go on the rooftop where the helicopters landed at, and they would have a prayer circle there. Yeah, and it was all different people from all different backgrounds, and I never knew that. My mother never talked to me about those things. you know. And that was some pretty special moments. That's the Thomas. Do we have another Marine that's Thomas Bruning? I don't know if you remember that name, David.
Yeah, yeah.
Thomas has a son here in the Twin Cities that he never saw. That I'm not even sure if he knew about him. The son was born in February of 1980. So he came home and he met this woman, Tammy. And they had a child, and Thomas is when I got here to Minnesota, I was looking for Thomas' grave at the big cemetery here, but there was no sign of him. And so every year, I would drive south to photograph the Vikings training camps. And for years, every time I would come back to Minneapolis, I'd see this church that had this huge steeple to it, and it'd be like late summer when the team was right. So to make a long story short, later on I found out through another friend in New York that Thomas had this son, and I met his son, and he told me where his father was buried at, and it was that church with that steeple in it that I had saw for 20 plus years driving from Mankato, Minnesota to Minneapolis. And so every time I go to Mankato now, I stop at that cemetery to visit. And I'm in close contact with his son to this day.
Nice. Yeah.
Speaking
It's
of banding together, being a part of that group, Jerry, you brought up a great story earlier of just the light. There were moments of levity, but David, you going in to visit, I'm sure that meant the world to Mike. But I want to ask you three, how did you band together in those months afterwards, and what did it mean to you that you still had your brothers to how did you support each other in that ward?
it's in the ward, because of infections. I mean, you were the only time that I ever saw anybody else was like if I were being transported to the restroom or something in passing. Infections is a really, really serious thing to deal with, you know. Um, I played a trick on Denise one day. I wanted water so bad. I was so thirsty. So we had these trays on our wheelchair, and there was a big tray in front, and I had my toothbrush there and some other items, and I purposely knocked the toothbrush off my tray because I knew once I got inside, inside for to be showered, I knew I would have free access to water. So I knocked it off, and she wheeled me in there, and I turned the water was on, and I was just like, like the Shawshank Redemption. You know what I mean? See, and waters is poured over me, right? But it made me so sick though, because everything that you had and you put in your body, it had to have calories in it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we never, for me, like I say, this is huge for me, and this is actually, to be honest with you guys, this is actually healing for me. To be able to talk about this with somebody that like I haven't seen, Mike and since that picture.
Yeah.
So there was really because we live in so many different parts of the world, and there was no social media then at that time, that we didn't have that connection. The Marine Corps never really brought us back together. We were kind
Glenn
of all on our own.
Glenn just asked how many survivors are still alive, and are you all in touch with one another? I guess that semi answers it.
Uh, I think this book is really, really, really helping that. These guys were just in San Antonio, and I just got back from Okinawa like a couple days before that, and I really, really wanted to be there. And I reached out to Mike and I told him, and I know it was public information. I'm not saying that, but I felt so bad. I got home that Thursday, and I think the event was Tuesday or Monday or something like that. And I still had to go to work because I still work, and I was just like, I got to figure out a way to get there, but I just couldn't make it work.
Mhm.
But this is really good because I mean we have the opportunity to see each other. Maybe this can make it go further. I don't know, but I'd like to see it go further.
We'd tried to have a reunion. Chaz was at two. I traveled to Japan frequently for work, but I went back to Mount Fuji 3 years ago for the first time. But we'd tried to have a reunion. Was it 2 years ago, Chaz? But I think the trip was just too much for so many people. But I think something, if we had like a central reunion, something gathering, maybe like in Chicago, someplace central, we get more people. But the Marine Corps is an odd entity in that, they say, well, you're a band of brothers. And it's more than just a phrase. When you live that close with guys for that amount of time and share experiences like this, even like Jerry said, in the hospital, there's that gallows humor that's just what Marines do. That's how you cope with stuff. It's just that sort of odd, even sometimes just bizarre humor that bonds us and gets us through things. And the three of us could get together tomorrow and it would be like we were never apart. That's just the way it is. So
I think
Chad,
Richard has his hand up. Richard
oh,
does.
thank you for letting me know. I'm usually in a different. Hey, Rick Weber.
Appreciate it. Hey guys, this is great. Semper Fi, appreciate it. I'm an Army guy, but similar stories. Went to OCS. We were apart. We're getting too old, but we do podcasts all the time. We every year for our graduation, we have a podcast. Every Veterans Day around that time, it may not be exactly Veterans Day, and guys will show up when they can. We're all getting too old to travel, and the wives don't want to go to these things. But I will tell you, I just got a call from my friend the other day. I can't wait to get together with the guys. We did do some reunions, but we're past that. But someone can organize it. It's not that difficult to organize. People come on, and you can have many reunions. I do that with my friends in Florida. It is as you age, and I can't tell you how old I am, but I'm not quite 80, but I'm darn close. But as you age, the friendship's still there. And after 55 years, we can finish each other's sentences. And that's what you have. That bond will never go away. There's nothing closer than people going through tragedy and battles and things like what you went through. And you need to share that because you can't keep it in. But so I would strongly suggest and strongly urge someone. All it takes is someone who knows how to do it. And now you guys are on podcast. Just organize it. And for the gentleman they picked on and wear sunglasses, my nickname all through OCS and in the Army was Hollywood. I always wore sunglasses. And I was not Hollywood. You can see I'm never Hollywood. But the idea is that, and they still call me Hollywood, but the idea is that you still have these friendships. And I learned this very early in the Army. There's three kind of friends: old friends, new friends, and you have your forever friends. And the people that you went through this with are your forever friends. And so
I think we haven't given Chaz enough credit for the amount of time and effort and passion and expense of his own that he went through to tell this story. Like I said, when he and I first talked, he said, yeah, let me throw this together. We'll do a podcast in time for the anniversary of the fire 4 years ago, Chaz. But when you read this book, the amount of detail that goes into it, tail numbers on airplanes, the manufacturers' names of ventilators, dentists that operated at Camp Fuji, the woman who worked at the PX, the Japanese woman, the amount of time and effort that Chaz has put into this will no doubt rekindle a lot of those lost friendships because we know where guys are at. I've stayed in touch with a few, but now I know where a lot of them are. Lugo's in Chicago. I know Hassel's, sister. I've talked to her, Glenn Roberts up in Vermont. But Chaz deserves more credit than he is getting. I know he's not going to become a millionaire for a bestseller off this book, as his wife hopes. But he should know that we are deeply appreciative of his efforts for telling our story and telling it really well, both the technical and logistics side as well as the human side of it. So
And
Chaz,
this is
you
an unflinching
can't say
book.
enough. Yeah.
This is an unflinching book,
Yeah.
Chaz. It doesn't shy away. As
No.
you mentioned, 135 plus interviews. Brad Washbaugh, I mentioned to you earlier. You know Brad from the Marine Corps Marathon. Brad read it. Brad, your thoughts?
I tell you, I've just been sitting here listening to every word from these Marines. What a story. It's been forgotten just for too long, too many years. And Chaz, big salute to you for doing, it's not work. I mean, you did this out of love. That's obvious. You did that out of love for Marines and the need to tell a story that can't be forgotten. And the book is fantastic. I read it, I think in a couple of days. I just couldn't put it down. And after reading it, I felt for the people that I see here tonight. And you could just, try to put yourself in the shoes of these Marines just for a minute to understand what they went through, not only then, but what they must have gone through in the years following. And it's a real strong story of human will and resilience to overcome. And it's so well done. So I had to say that, Chaz. You did a masterpiece. You did a great credit for the Marine Corps, a great credit for these Marines and corpsmen that were there at Camp Fuji that day. So my thanks to you and all the Marines that were there.
I think something that we should also bring out, that the point of this book was not to place blame, but to hold someone accountable for logistics errors, who did what, who should have made this decision, but to tell the story. And I think he did, as you said, a masterful job of telling the story with a lot of truth and honesty, unpolished as it may be, but without saying this was your fault or this is who is responsible for this. And the sad part is I read it in manuscript form and it was 100,000 words. Half the story's been left out because Chaz had to cut it down to 50,000 words to get it published.
Well,
So
actually,
there's so many stories in manuscript that didn't get told.
165,000 had to be cut to 110,000. They let me have that. But it's
Two-thirds
probably
anyway,
better
yeah.
for it because there were some tangents that were interesting to me, maybe wouldn't be to everybody.
Chaz, if I could just jump in, I've not read the book. I'm going to now that I've heard this. Did you have any challenges getting it published?
So interestingly, I've never written a book before. I'll never write another book. I had a long career as a journalist. I worked mostly in broadcasting, but I've done long form documentaries. I've done projects that involved a lot of research. Nothing on this scale, though. I probably approached 7 or 8 publishers, and either perhaps in half got no response at all. The others responded and said, "Well, we think it's interesting, but it's not something we think that we can sell." And then I approached the University of Nebraska Press, who loved it right away. So many aspects of this, as I look back, make it appear a project meant to be. I had just retired from this career in journalism. My research chops were still sharp. I had all this time because of the pandemic. I just happened to fall into research material that got me a good start. And then it was very easy to get it published. Now, I didn't approach publishers until I was basically finished with it. So I worked as a reporter for many years, and in some ways, this was sort of an experiment. I thought every day I put these reports out, and they're so incomplete. They don't provide context. If only I could, let listeners or readers or viewers know this, they would understand it better. What if I could do a project where I just found everything that I could? And so basically, I had the manuscript written, and it was 165,000 words before I began looking for publishers, because I wanted the only deadline to be my ability to find everything that I could. And then the fact that when I eventually was in touch with Potomac Books, which is the University of Nebraska Press imprint, they went for it right away. It was almost too easy.
Great story.
Chaz, I have about 3 more questions. I know we have coming up on about 10 minutes left. I wanted to mention, why was this forgotten? Why is this a forgotten piece of Marine Corps history?
So this happened on October 19th, 1979. 16 days later, U.S. hostages were taken at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The Iran hostage crisis would go on to last 444 days. Attention just shifted immediately. So what attention had been paid to this event, there hadn't been a lot of it, but there had been some, but immediately that was swept away. When that happened, only 1 or 2 Marines had died. So the death toll went over a period of 54 days from the day of the fire. Only 1 Marine died actually on the scene of the fire. 3 others died in Japan. 1 died, Tom Brunig, who Jerry mentioned, died about half an hour after the medevac left, flying to Texas. And then over a period of, a couple of months, 8 or 9 others died in San Antonio at the Army Hospital of infection and some of these other health problems that were brought on by the fire. So I attribute about 75% of the lack of attention to that. The other 25% might be that some people in the Marine Corps decided maybe it's best if we just not talk about this. So for instance, Leatherneck Magazine, the magazine of the Marines, one might think that there would be an article, if not about the fire, then perhaps about some of these Marines who had borne the pain and were continuing to thrive, were working through the hard work of recovery. But Leatherneck Magazine never published an article about anything to do with the fire. And so I infer from that there were some people thinking, we don't want to beg questions about, what might have caused things. Could it have been prevented? That's all inference on my part. To David's point about attributing blame, it wasn't my intent. My goal was to, as a journalist, to be a reporter. I wanted to find as much as I could in documents and in memories, and hopefully triangulate maybe between a couple documents and a memory, or a memory and a couple documents, to, as best I could, 40 years after the fact, lay out what happened, and then let people draw conclusions as they may. So I included things that where people might say, it's interesting that that person reacted that way, or did this or didn't do that. But it was my goal was to create a report from which people could draw conclusions. And so questions of accountability in some cases will be raised, and I leave that to the reader to draw conclusions.
So Al, you've been a step ahead of me, Al. I've had all your questions that you got in the chat. I thumbs up them because I was getting to them. Standard operating procedures. Did anything change in the Marine Corps after Fuji Fire?
Yes, about 6 or 8 months after the fire, there was a pen change made to the Marine Corps fuel handling guide that specifically raised the issue of if you're dealing with terrain that where erosion is a problem, and it's perhaps above where troops are billeted, you can go beyond the restrictions on number of feet from buildings and take those into account. It was somewhat specific to a situation exactly like was found at Fuji, but there was a pen change made so that all of those documents, the technical manuals around the Marine Corps, were changed, telling people to take that into consideration when handling fuel in that sort of terrain.
Those common sense things, yeah.
And is this the memorial at Camp Fuji?
It is. This was commissioned and constructed by Japanese business leaders near Camp Fuji, and was put in place in December of 1979. It's been moved a couple of times since. Now it sits right at the base of the camp flagpoles. The camp, by the way, is just orders of magnitude improved over what it was in 1979. But and every year, sometime, my sense is beginning in the 1990s, they began having annual commemorations at the camp. And so on October 19th, every year, they do a ceremony at which they read out the names of the Marines who passed away, and they recall that tragedy.
And the Marines' names who died are on the back of that stone as well.
So Camp Fuji still exists. There's still Marines stationed there.
It is, and it's still used in the same way. Marines are still coming up from Okinawa to use this larger training area, but it is just so much improved. And this began. I gained a huge degree of respect for Robert Barrow, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps at that time, who you can read in the book and from correspondence. He took this. He'd been commandant about 100 days when this happened. He took this very personally and deeply, and there were improvements made even before he finished his 4-year term as commandant. There was a fire station, for instance, manned by Japanese firefighters on the camp before he left office. And then in years after, he had gotten things started on improvements that eventually built much better barracks that could handle storms. Fuel was stored underground, and many other improvements came about because of actions he took.
I unmuted a longtime VBC support member, Reverend Ben Wright. Ben, you put that you had done ministry in burn units, and I kind of wanted you to talk a bit about your experience going onto a ward as someone who didn't experience a tragedy but went to them anyway.
Yeah, the gentleman talked about the levels of pain, and people would come into the unit and they would actually put them in drug-induced comas for a while. And so many of the people in it were intubated and, of course, on ventilators because of all the lung damage from smoke and the various things. And it was interesting that the surgeons that worked on the burn unit, their biggest concern was always, how are they doing spiritually? Because they knew that people who were healthy spiritually could survive, and people who weren't had a real struggle. I did a lot of ministry with the people, the nurses and people that worked in the ward, because it's very hard for them because they have to push people to get them to do things. And the numbers of deaths. In fact, we would do memorial services, with the staff, because they had to grieve over every person who died.
Thank you, Ben. With our last couple minutes here, I wanted to make sure everyone was heard in the room. If you had a question, or if you'd like to wave your hand or raise your digital hand. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just like to say what David touched on as far as Chaz and the book. I think I can speak for all three of us here that were there that he nailed this book when he wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And if he hadn't have written this book, I would have never had the opportunity to get back to San Antonio and thank a doctor and 2 nurses that worked on us in 1979. And that means the world to me to be able to thank those guys. And Chaz made it possible with this book. And thank you, Chaz.
It's a privilege. And, interestingly, even early on when I was doing research, one of the proudest moments was I was able to set up a Zoom chat that with Isaac Williams, who arguably the worst burned of all the survivors, and the former Army surgeon who worked on him. And I put together this Zoom chat, and then I just sat back and let them talk, and they hadn't seen each other for 40 years. And that just, oh gosh, it felt good to be able to do that. And I've been able to connect by connecting other people. That's been perhaps for me one of the most rewarding aspects of this.
Well, I hope Jerry is able to connect through Chaz. And I was going to ask, part of my next question was just going to be, if there was a silver lining here, what would it be? But maybe it's this. Maybe it's finding each other all these years later.
Well, I think that this book here has helped us find each other. And it's also, it's very therapeutic for me personally, to know that I'm not the only one that's dealing with these issues. Chaz is the one that's connected us. He's made me read this book. He's made me reach out to Mike.
Absolutely.
And that's
The book shares so much more of the story than even what I experienced personally. I mean, the way, they got ventilators from all over the United States and flew them through Alaska to what went on at the hospital. And The Navy guys that were flying those helicopters in conditions, typhoon conditions that they shouldn't have been flying in to get Jerry out of there. There's so much more to this story that I ever even realized, being there firsthand. And that book just, I'm like, man, I just can't believe all these things happened that I never knew about, even being there.
Yeah, I agree. That's the power of good journalism, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for everyone here, if you're interested in reading Fuji Fire by Chaz Henry, I put the link into the chat, and there's a 40% off code with 6AS25. So go to the link.
That's buying the hardcover directly from the publisher, but it's also, of course, available in bookstores and on Amazon. There's a Kindle copy, there's an audiobook, but the best deal for the hardcover is directly from the publisher. It's very kind of them to offer this 40% off.
Well, I want to thank you, all three of you, Mike, David, Jerry. Jerry, thank you for coming on. I'm sure that may have had some hesitation, but I hope that it was worth it for you to come and join us for this conversation. Chaz, as everyone said here, thank you for writing this and for bringing everybody together. Chaz, I'd love to give you the last word here.
I think that this is something that shouldn't have been forgotten. As I mentioned, I think I fell into it. It didn't start with an intentional plan, but I think this may end up, after my years as a Marine and as a journalist, this may end up being the most meaningful project that I've ever undertaken. And I just appreciate the invitation to help make more people aware of what happened at Camp Fuji in 1979.
Thank you. And for all of you, our VBC members, and for our guests tonight, please join us. We're going to be back on Monday night, honoring the 250th birthday of the Navy. So even if you're a Marine or Army, we'd love to see you. If you want to rib some Navy guys, that might have some fun. And we'll be back next Thursday night with Glenn. Glenn, what do you have coming up next Thursday?
We're going to revisit the story of the 688 Postal Battalion in World War II. A woman who found out that her mother was a member of that battalion, didn't know anything about it, and so she researched it and has written a book about her mother's experience and her experience in uncovering the story of her mother as part of the 688.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here this evening. We look forward to seeing you at a future VBC event. Yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Sean.
Thank you,
guys.